So my understanding of the first set of riots, like the 2005 that you were describing, was that there was essentially like a feeling of segregation and lack of job opportunities among young North African people in the cities. Is that a correct understanding of how it was pitched, at least? Or
yeah, but then we were talking about a tiny minority of, well, the worst kind of youth of these migrant backgrounds. The French, even Sarkozy at that time, coined the term racaille, which means scum. They are the scum of French society. And they were basically burning their neighbors' cars at that point. So it was weird, but it lasted for 3 weeks. And I think the worst point was about 10 days in, they had thousands of arrests and hundreds of cars burned in one night, or the other way around, thousands of cars burned and hundreds of arrests. But they reached this time, they reached this the second night, that same level.
Oh, and they're shooting too. I mean, they've got weapons out. It's looking really bad in the streets. Did you guys see the zoo animals that they released out in the streets?
Yeah. 3 lions and 1 zebra.
And lion also.
Yeah. A rhino? Wow.
If you allow, I can come up for the research on this I have done. And then maybe in case, well, there's a larger problem than what is visible. If you allow, you can actually expand the discussion.
We should let Mr. Lambo in because he probably also remembers 2005.
But you don't need to remember 2005 or something. It's something that already happened for more than 20 years. It's a normal thing that happened in France. Always been like that and going to continue to be like that if they just do nothing about it. It's that I talked to Shadowy about that, and it's like the third time that something big happens in France in that scale. But even if you're celebrating New Year's Eve in Paris, you're going to have riots. It's just a big problem with non-educated kids that are causing all these things. I don't know really how I need to explain that, but it's something that every riot you have, the Gilets jaunes, anti-climate protestings. Every time you have something like that, we have the same in Brussels. We have the same problem in Brussels. If you have people that processing on the streets, you're going to have these type of guys that coming to do riots because if they find an opportunity to do stupid things. Well, France champion of the World Cup. The news don't going to show that, but you had riots in Champs-Élysées.
Well, you know, there's that famous French saying, "Let them eat cake," right? Marie Antoinette, when she's told about starving people, let them eat cake. That's a saying for the modern times because, you know, when people get hungry, when their children aren't eating, and then the corporate media, you know, they're still going to be talking about the LGBT nonsense. They're still going to be talking about the climate change nonsense as if that stuff is important. They're still going to be talking about a couple of billionaires dying in a submarine on a holiday as if that's important. The corporate media is basically screaming, let them eat cake. It's so out of touch. What's actually happening in the Western world is financial crisis, and people are starting to get hungry. Their electricity bills are getting to the point where they are choosing between turning the heater on and feeding their kids. And let me tell you, it's like anyone who's ever been to the third world, they'll tell you, violence is not being nasty to a homosexual. Violence is 10 guys with machetes coming in and butchering a family to take their food, right? That's what violence is. And we are rapidly entering a world where the disconnect between the banking elite who are talking about nonsense, just stupid things that don't matter, like LGBT and climate change and all this stuff, that's becoming massively disconnected from the real world. And nobody wants to talk about the economic realities. And particularly, no one's really telling the truth about COVID and the way that COVID changed money flows. Because like it's a massive, massive, massive transfer of wealth. The debt that was incurred by governments, all that debt, that record level of debt, that all has to be serviced with interest payments to the banks. And that all comes out of taxation, right? And that taxation comes out of people's income. And so it cuts into their ability to pay for electricity and food.
No.
I think we're rapidly approaching a world where like it becomes like Marie Antoinette, right? Our corporate media is going to be telling us to eat cake when we can't afford bread. And I think that's accelerating in the West.
Go learn the code.
No, it has nothing, just nothing to do. Don't put COVID or something else in that story. But it's happening. So, how you have migration in Europe? It's a big story. It happens in the 60s. Europe needed some workers. So they invited people from Algeria, from Italy, because you have a lot of Italians, native people, original people living in Belgium and the Limburg. But like in France, you have a lot of Algerians, Moroccans, and you can also blame it to the countries they invaded. How do you call that? The correct term?
Like old colonies.
Yeah, the colonies.
Colonized.
Yeah. So these people coming also to France. But like situation in Belgium, we invited people to come to work in Belgium, to come to work in the mines. Happened also in France. So you have a lot of Algerians, Moroccans coming to France to working in the mines.
Okay. I agree with you, Lambo. I agree with you because...
Hey Dan. Well, I'm gonna let you have the mic, but we should just say something because that guy dropped like $20 in the chat asking about that kangaroo. Does anybody know anything about that?
Man, let me tell you something.
I can't find it. But it's Dan's mic. I'm sorry, he was going next.
Look, I'm gonna be honest. If there was a kangaroo in the zoo in France, I hope it got let go for 5 minutes so it can enjoy life and then killed because it's a useless animal coming from like Australia. But I'm agree with Mr. Lambo. This has happened in my country, like in the United States. We've had people of like minorities that come over and then do bad things, get shot, and then you have riots. It's easier for me as a Mexican American immigrant, like my people have rioted all the time in Los Angeles. It just comes easy to us because we see no repercussion. We see no actual we don't believe in the law. When you're coming in as an immigrant, it's just easier to go crazy, and minorities get killed. Maybe it gets blasted on the news. So I think what's happening in France is what's happened in America for so many times, and that's what all I think.
Yeah, immigrants if they have enough to eat, and as soon as they don't have enough to eat, the immigrants.
No.